Hey there friends, welcome to my latest Q video. It is October 28th, 2025. It has been 8 years since Q's first post on 4chan, and I am here to give you a little bit of an update looking back at the Q operation 8 years after it began, and just share my thoughts on the entire operation. I'm getting a lot of questions on YouTube now. Now that I'm back on YouTube, questions from people who are looking at some of the videos I posted and saying, is this still going on? Is it a thing? What do you think of Q now? 8 years later, was it a psyop? Some people are looking at what's happening saying, oh man, it's all coming true. So I'm going to give you I don't know if this is going to be a short or a long video. I have a lot of thoughts on Q. I'm just going to share those thoughts here. So I literally was following the Q post from the very beginning. Early, I think first week of November, last part of October, there were people looking at the posts that Q was dropping on 4chan. Tracy Beans got on it right away. She was one of the early followers. She was looking at the messages. She was decoding them on her YouTube channel. Denise was following Tracy Beans and following along, and I was listening in the background going, I don't understand any of this junk. But God started giving me dreams related to Q. And I was like, okay, hang on. Maybe I need to take this thing seriously. So I began looking at the posts, and it took me a while. It took me a month or two to get a handle on what this was all about. And then, I have a few older videos from December of 2017 where I talk a little bit about the Q posts. I started doing actual decodes in January 2018. Once I got my sea legs, once I kind of figured out what this whole thing is about, that's when I started doing the decodes. And I have put out over 250 videos about Q since then. I really only do Q videos when Q is posting. All right, so there's a lot of people who are doing live streams on X and Facebook and YouTube, and they're still doing decodes, and a lot of them are doing deltas. A delta is, best way to think of it is like if Q makes a post on a certain date, let's say October 28th, 2017, and that today, 8 years later, October 28th, 2025, that's an 8-year delta, right? So a delta is a marker. It's two markers in time. There can be a 10-minute delta. President Trump makes a post, Q drops a post 10 minutes later, it's a 10-minute delta. All right. Q has used those 5-minute, 10-minute deltas early on as a way to suggest that he was close to President Trump. And the deltas have been, the zero deltas in particular, have been used as proofs to suggest that Q is close to President Trump. There have been, I think, the last time I counted, there were 33 zero deltas in Q's operation, where Q posted first, President Trump followed, and within 1 minute. So they had the post had the same timestamp, but Q posted first within 1 minute. Zero delta. It's been 33 of those, and in one day there were actually 3 zero deltas in a day where Q and Trump posted simultaneously, Q posting first. So when Q has gone dark, or when Q switches from one board to another board to another board, Q has been on 4chan and several boards on 8chan, and then 8kun. Whenever Q has to switch to a board, Q updates his trip code. He creates a new trip code, and he always warns the board in advance, hey, trip code update is coming. And the trip code update usually coincides with a tweet by President Trump. It's a 0 delta. So Q posts, President Trump posts, same time, and then boom, you get the trip code update. That is one way that Q has affirmed continually throughout the operation that it's been the same person in control of that account, in control of the trip code. So the reason I'm saying all this partly is to give some explanation for people who don't understand how we know whether this is, the original Q, or, a lot of people have said, oh, April of 2018, it was taken over by somebody else. And I don't think there's any evidence to support those claims. I believe the person who has posted most recently, November of 2022, is the same person who posted October 28th of 2017. Just my opinion. But the deltas. There are a lot of people out there on social media who are doing videos breaking down all these deltas. This delta, that delta, taking the timestamps and the post numbers and trying to make some connections in those things. I personally, I'm not impressed with any of that. I don't think there's much relevance to most of it. However, once in a while, there will be a very interesting coincidence that makes you go, I wonder if this is actually a coincidence. The day that James Comey was indicted, back in, was it July or August? It was interesting because it was a 5-year delta. Right, the day Comey got indicted, there was a 5-year delta where Q posted a link to a tweet by James Comey, and in the tweet, Comey was professing his innocence regarding all the claims that Trump made about him being a crooked cop. And I thought, okay, wait a minute, hang on a sec. Comey posts a tweet proclaiming his innocence. Exactly, Q posts that link to that tweet, and on the 5-year anniversary of Q's post, Comey's indicted. I think that's, is it a coincidence? Maybe. The other possible explanation is that Pam Bondi or somebody in the DOJ was instructed by Trump or Dan Scavino or somebody who's on the Q team, hey, we want Comey to be indicted on this day. And we have a special reason for that, so just make sure he's indicted on this day. And they say, okay, well, hey, we'll make that happen. And they may not even know why they're being told it has to be on this day. But sometimes in the mind of Trump and Scavino and the team, they will have people do things on certain days, at certain times. And I think the people doing it don't even know what's going on. Let me give you an example. Here's a really interesting one. So, and this is, in my opinion, one of the greatest Q proofs of all. So go back to 2019. The deep state managed to deplatform 8chan. They got it taken down. And Jim Watkins, it took him 3 months to get another platform set up, 8kun, to get a board set up. They set up a Q research board. And Q comes back and starts posting on 8kun under the same trip code. So Q and CodeMonkey are going back and forth about, CodeMonkey's like, well, we need to do a salt rotation. And Q's like, well, I got this old trip code issue we have to resolve here. Like, can you hold on the salt rotation until I can have time to, deal with this trip code issue? And CodeMonkey's like, okay, whatever. So what Q did was, when the Horowitz DOJ Inspector General report on FISA abuse was about to be dropped. Q tells the board, okay, trip update coming. That post was a 0 delta with a tweet by President Trump. And then Q changes his trip code, and then he posts a watch. It's a picture of a watch. We've all seen this watch before. It's in a lot of the watch proofs. And the watch has a time of 1:29 on it. All right. And we're all scratching our heads like, okay, what does that mean? There's a watch with 129. Nobody knew what it meant. All right. Exactly a week later, the FISA report from the DOJ is posted on the Inspector General's Twitter account at exactly 129. Exactly 7 days later, from when Q posted that watch picture with the watch showing 129, at 129 Eastern time, we always do timestamps, Eastern time zone, because that's where the White House is. DOJ Inspector General's report posts the FISA, a PDF version of the Inspector General's report on FISA abuse. At the same time, 129, Attorney General Bill Barr posts his comment and his objection with some of the findings of the report. And also at 129, U.S. Attorney John Durham, he posts his response to the report on FISA abuse at 129 on the Connecticut U.S. Attorney's account. So you have the Connecticut U.S. Attorney who posts his response to the FISA report at 129. Bill Barr posts his response to the FISA report at 129. And the report itself was posted at 129. All of them exactly a week after Q posted a watch showing the time 129. Yes, I'm sure that's just a coincidence, and Q had nothing to do with any of that. All right. That is an example of a delta. All right. And like I said, some people are out there on social media. They're doing all these, looking at all the deltas and stuff. I don't know that there's a whole lot of relevance to most of it. Personally, I think a lot of what Q has posted in the past doesn't have a lot of relevance today. Just my opinion. There are some things that are still relevant, in my opinion, and most of them have to do with the FISA scandal, which President Trump calls a Russia hoax. Some people call it Spygate. A lot of that information is still relevant today because those people are now under criminal investigation by Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, and the crew at FBI and DOJ. Oh, and the reason why I wanted to talk about this this Delta thing is, like I said, I think sometimes President Trump, Scavino, Q, whoever, they're giving instructions to people like the U.S. Attorney in Connecticut or the Attorney General to do certain things, to post certain things at a certain time, to make the delta happen, to make the zero delta happen. And so that's part of the operation. But deltas are not the only part of the operation. There's a lot more to it. At bottom, Q's operation is a military intelligence operation designed to expose institutional corruption. Full stop. And that's what it is. It is an operation where Q posts information, links, videos, declassified documents, social media posts that piece together evidence of institutional corruption. That's what Q's operation is all about. And if you think of it in those terms, it's really simple. That's what it's about. If someone is talking about Q in some way that doesn't have to do with the exposure of institutional corruption, they're not talking about Q. They're talking about some extraneous issue that's unrelated. So it is interesting to me that we are now seeing the investigation and prosecution of the Spygate conspirators. So when John Ratcliffe, back in, I think it was June or July, made those criminal referrals to Pam Bondi at DOJ for John Brennan, former CIA director, and then they got criminal referrals for Comey and Clapper. I was like, okay, Well, I guess we're in the justice phase of the operation now. And it looks like, after all these years, President Trump finally has people at FBI and DOJ. He's getting rid of a lot of the deadwood and the deep staters. We finally have people in the justice system who are seriously going after this criminal cabal. Whether the courts allow that to happen or not is another issue. Back in 2017, 2018, most of us did not know how corrupt our court system is. Now we know. Now we know. It's pretty bad. Fortunately, I think that Trump's people have learned some lessons from the attempted prosecution by John Durham in Virginia and D.C. With Spygate. They prosecuted Sussman and Danchenko and Kleinsmith. And Kleinsmith pleaded guilty. Sussman and Danchenko acquitted because, well, those juries 100% in the tank for Hillary and the Democrats. So it looks like the grand juries that are impaneled right now are impaneled outside of Virginia and D.C. in other areas where there's probably a more likely outcome of a fair verdict being rendered if wherever those cases go and wherever they're tried in a criminal court. I'm cautiously optimistic about that happening. Yeah, like I said, when I saw those criminal referrals being made, and then you have people like Mike Davis and some other people who are connected to the DOJ and Trump people talking about this conspiracy investigation, I became much more optimistic about the actual prosecution of these corrupt people. And I know there's a lot of people on social media who are screaming, they're guilty of treason. Hey, we got to charge them with treason. There's got to be military tribunals and all this other stuff. Q said no deals. Well, okay. Q said a lot of stuff in 2017 and 2018. A lot of things have changed since then. What has changed? Well, let me tell you what's changed. And look, when it comes to Q, I have always tried to play it level, play it straight. I call balls and strikes. If Q posts something that I think he just nailed something really well, I'll say, you know what? You nailed it. Good on you, mate. If Q misses it, I'm the first one to say, look, I don't think that was, I think that was a bad call. I'm not down with that. And here's some examples. Q told us early on, trust Sessions, trust Chris Wray, trust Mike Pompeo, Kansas and Pompeo, and all these other people, and suggested that these white hats, I hate the term white hats. I don't like the black hat, white hat dichotomy, because that's not how the world actually works. There are no people who are purely benevolent. There are no people who are purely evil. Everyone is a little mix of both. And some people who are generally good do evil things, and some people who are generally evil occasionally do good things. It's a much more of a gray subject. I'm not going to get into that right now. But we were told by Q to trust all these people. Nakasone, General Nakasone at NSA. And most of them ended up being deep state corruptocrats. Nakasone allowed a lot of sick perversion and corruption to come into the NSA. Ezra Cohen has had a lot to say about that on his Twitter account, called Nakasone one of the worst people to ever be in the NSA, and did a lot of damage to the agency during his time. Pompeo, it turns out, deep stater, is completely sold out. Is backing the war in Ukraine and all the chicanery that the deep state is doing. Jeff Sessions turned out to be a very weak person who just didn't have the intestinal fortitude to bring prosecutions. Chris Wray ended up being a deep state sympathizer. You know, he faked this out for a while because he fired a bunch of people at FBI, but he still refused to investigate actual criminal activity, allowed horrendous things to happen with the FBI in January 6th. So all of that is to say, I think people, when they evaluate Q's correctness and predictions and assessments of character, there are some people who think that Q is like omniscient. Like Q is supposed to know everything. And I got into conversations with people who literally think that everything Q ever said, predicted, character assessments were always 100% spot on. And I just don't think that's true. Q is human. Q is not omniscient. And Q obviously made mistakes. Q actually admitted to making mistakes. There was many posts, you go through them, where Q was like, yeah, we kind of misjudged that one. It didn't work out the way we thought. Chris Ray is a good example. If you go back through the posts in 2022, you'll see that Chris Ray has a photo there with an X through it that Anon put on there. That was Q's admission that, yeah, I misjudged Chris Ray's character. He ended up being a deep stater. All right. Q has made some, I think, incorrect character assessments about certain people, and he had the courage to stand up and say, yeah, I was wrong. That guy's a crook. I'm sorry for telling you that, to trust this guy. So we have to deal with those realities that President Trump and Q and a bunch of other people, they misjudged a lot of the people who were in the first Trump administration. But that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater, because a lot of things that Q exposed, posted about, and I wouldn't want to say predicted, because Q is not in the business of predicting things. That's another mistake a lot of people make. I see a lot of people online and people leaving in comments on YouTube saying, oh, nothing that Q ever predicted came true. Well, here's your problem if that's your view. Q never claimed that he was going to correctly predict future events. In fact, one of the most recent posts, go on the board, says, I'm not a prophet, you're not a prophet, we are not prophets. Focus on the mission, or something to that effect. It was basically letting people know, look, I don't have a crystal ball. This isn't about me predicting the future. So if you're evaluating Q on that, by that criteria, you're missing it. That's not how you evaluate Q. That said, Q has hinted at events to come in very vague, cryptic fashion. And a lot of us have looked at these posts and didn't understand what he was talking about when the post was first dropped. We're all scratching our heads like, what in the world is this about? What do you mean? I don't get this whole Iron Eagle thing. What's that about? What is the Wizards and Warlocks? What is this? What's that? And then as time goes on and events play out, when the relevant event happens, you look back and go, oh man, he was telling us about this 3 months ago in a cryptic fashion. Q does not overtly make predictions. Q drops these cryptic clues and hints about future events. And then when the event happens, we all look back and go, oh, there it was. He was kind of hinting about it back there. Plausible deniability. Q's posts are crafted in such a way to foreshadow future events, to not give away the plot line to the enemy who are also reading Q's posts, but also in a way that allows us to look back when the event happens, look back and go, God, there it was right there. He was telling us about it, as evidence of foreknowledge. And so the question is, how does Q know the future? Q answered that question. Control. Q's not a time traveler. It's not Project Looking Glass. It's not, AI. when Q was asked, how do you know the future? Q said control. What does that mean? Q, being part of the Trump administration, Trump first administration, or in NSA or wherever the Q was working at the time, had access to the White House. And the White House has the ability to make things happen. So because the president can make things happen of his own volition, President Trump can set up posts through Q that are going to foreshadow things that he knows are going to happen because he's the president. He can make them happen. And he can just let Q know, hey, this is what we're posting about today. And in a couple of months, it's going to happen. So just, write the post and put it out there. That's how Q has been able to foreshadow the future. And it's interesting because we were told for many years that the corruption of the government, higher learning. So, colleges, the whole education system has been corrupted everywhere down to elementary school, up to institutions of higher learning, Stanford and Harvard, tons of corruption. That's being exposed. Corruption in Big Pharma. Q posted a lot about Big Pharma in 2020 during the COVID thing. That's being exposed. Corruption in the Vatican. Corruption in Congress. Corruption in the courts. Corruption in the media, the broadcast media, and corruption in social media. All of that corruption has been revealed through Q's posts, and it's all being exposed, it's all being kind of dealt with. We got mea culpa from YouTube and Zuckerberg at Facebook, for they admitted that they allowed accounts to be suspended, taken down, deplatformed because political pressure from certain political people. All of that has been exposed. So to me, it's a lot of what Q has posted about has come out. It's been validated. We now know about it. And I think that what we're seeing currently with the investigation into Spygate, the likely indictment of, we could see Barack Obama indicted. I'm not predicting it, but here's the thing. Obama has presidential immunity for acts committed while he was in the Oval Office. However, after he leaves the Oval Office, he's a citizen. He doesn't have immunity. And there's this conspiracy going on. And the case could be made that it is conspiracy against rights, conspiracy against the United States. I think conspiracy against rights is a really good likelihood. Because the way that the federal statute, criminal statute for conspiracy against rights is constructed, there's almost no effective statute of limitations. There doesn't have to be an overt act to continue the statute of limitations running. As long as people are here's the thing about conspiracy against rights. All right, and here's where it comes from. Really simple case. Carter Page. He was a low-level Trump staffer with the Trump campaign. James Comey, Andrew McCabe. Comey signed 3 FISA warrants, or applications, to surveil Carter Page. Andrew McCabe signed 1 application to surveil Carter Page. They knowingly included false information in the application, submitted it to the FISA court, and got a warrant, essentially, to surveil Carter Page using FISA, which scoops up all information and gives you the ability to go and surveil whoever is in their list of contacts. So all the people on the Trump campaign that Carter Page was communicating with in 2016 and 2017, they were also under surveillance. So Comey's people at FBI were surveilling the entire Trump campaign through FISA, through an application that they knowingly lied about. And Kevin Kleinsmith was the one who lied about whether